Hello and welcome to Power Reflections, a proud member of the Duff Network where we reflect on Wildbow's most unfinished work as it releases. I'm Ruben Morehouse.
And I'm Elliot Diebold.
And we're coming at you live in the Discord. But that's not all, Elliot. We also have a very special guest with us today. Do you want to introduce them?
Yeah, here they are.
And then I guess we just edit them in post there.
I thought you might jump in with something. It sounded like you had a plan.
No, I
don't. Before we get into the episode, some quick news from over in Kingslinger's Land. For those who aren't aware, Matt and Scott are finishing that up next year, and they're organizing like this big in-person event in a town called Bangor in Maine, which I think is where Stephen King lives or something. Anyway, but yeah, it's going to be like a big little Stephen King con thing. It sounds pretty cool.
Stephen King Kong, did you say?
Con, no, just no second G.
It sounded like you said a Stephen King Kong, which is something that I would love to see.
That's going to be his next book, probably.
Yeah. Anyway, so yes, that sounds very exciting. So there is more news about that on the Duff Media website. So head there if you want to find out more.
Yeah, there's like a bunch of events, stuff like Matt and Scott are obviously going to be there. It's going to be a great way to round off that show. So yeah, check out the thing. I think they're doing a survey to like gauge interest in what stuff to do. So yeah, go check that out.
Yeah, on the Duff Media website. But instead of talking about Bangor, Maine, let's talk about Verona. I was going to make a joke, but it feels a little bit too risque, so I'm not going to.
Okay.
Verona's in the Crucible, Elliot, and every time she takes a step, she ages by a year. And that's a pretty fun setup right from the get-go.
Yeah, this chapter almost immediately establishes itself as an all-timer, doesn't it? Like, I was like 2 paragraphs in, and I was like, okay, this is going to be a top 5. The set dressing right from the start is just... like the red sun and stars, and like the sun is bleeding, which is like, I don't know, feels like a bit insecure from Charles. Like,
yes, yeah, right. I mean, I had that thought too of like, Charles, do you ever have any original ideas?
I wasn't sure if that was meant to be a part of him getting stabbed, but I was kind of like, either way, the fact that he's represented by like a bleeding sun, I was like, come on, dude. Like, it's like, oh, everyone else was the moon, but I'm the sun, which is better.
Yeah, it's very funny. It's very funny that that's how this is playing out. And you're right. I don't think Charles intentionally made it a ripoff of, the Carmine and Miss. But it is funny. But yeah,
I mean, he seems to accidentally stumble into ripping himself and other people off an awful lot, doesn't
he? Yes, you're right. He doesn't set out to do it, but he's just not original enough to avoid it, maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, like the immediate premise that we get is it's caveman times, no practice, you just got to rely on your wits, and also you're aging really quickly. And it's just like, oh shit, like straight off the bat, it's wild. And it's just like, we don't talk about it enough, but Wildbow has some really cool ideas sometimes.
Yeah, this is 100%. I was just so on board with this setup at the start. I was like, this is so. I was like, I want to play this game. I want to turn. I was also thinking, like, as I was reading this, I was like, man, if Derosha got in here, she'd end up depowering the ritual just by refusing to leave. Like,
well, that's pretty much what Verona tries to do.
That's fair. But like, Verona was doing it for tactical reasons. I feel like the Aurum would be like, okay, Derosha, you got to go up the mountain. She's like, no, 5 more minutes. Like,
I don't want to. I still want to play.
But Dad. But yeah, like this is just. It was so cool. Like, I was just so captivated by this problem, and I thought Verona was a really fun POV for us to see this through, because I love that way she like tackles problems by sort of taking that step back and like answering the sort of fundamental questions. Like, she's like, okay, what is the goal? Like, what am I trying to do? What is Charles trying to do? Like, how? And she takes that right back to the chats she's had with Declan and stuff, which was like a great callback, but it's also just like an example of why Verona was probably the best POV for us to see this stage through, because you're like, okay, like she makes it really fun to play along because she's asking the questions, which kind of prompts you to be asking them as you read. It's really fun.
Yes, I kind of I agree with you that Verona does very well in here. I don't know if I would say that she's the best POV to see this through, just because like it seems to be this first section of the Crucible is about like the building of community and relationships. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
as we kind of see later, Lucy and Avery go about that in their own completely different but cool ways. And I'm just kind of like, I just would have loved to see them all do it,
Oh
to
yeah.
be honest.
No, 100%. I've got notes later on in here about how mad I am that we're not going to get to see all three. I guess maybe
Yeah.
we will. It seems very unlikely, but
Well, sure, yeah.
um, no, I mean, yeah, obviously, I really wanted to see all. There's details I'm desperate to get out of all three,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I guess Verona's just saying, like, I guess if you kind of had to pick one, I think the fact that she's like the least traditionally just a community former is exactly why she is kind of the fun one, because like, you know, forming a tribe of humans isn't really something she normally sets out to do. It just kind of
Yeah.
happens accidentally at her halfway house. Um, but
Yeah.
like, it was also just, I guess, from the like gamey perspective, it was really fun watching like Verona kind of figure this out. Whereas I feel like Avery would have
Yes.
just like, I don't know, done some shit and it just kind of worked and she went with it. Like that's her problem solving strategy. Was
Well,
I like Verona going back to core principles.
yeah, I think Avery from her path experience is like figure out the rules and follow them, you know,
Yeah,
where Verona is like figure out the rules and try and break them,
break
which I
them.
think is a really fun start to the Crucible because we do want to know what are the limits, right? And
Yeah.
Verona's the one who's most likely to try and push those limits.
Yeah, and especially like I'm kind of assuming we can get a few more chapters with other stages of the Crucible from each
No, I
Kenneteer.
think that's it. I think it's done now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like I guess it was fun to start with Verona as well, because then we're kind of really establishing like the meta game aspect to it. Like now we're going into the next chapter with that kind of understanding of like the rules about figuring out the rules.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, like I also think like what's fun about this chapter is like it may be too early to call it like the last Verona chapter or one of the last Verona chapters, but there's like a lot of really fun full circle tie-in to her journey stuff in here. Like obviously
Mm.
she brings up her whole speaker to the voiceless thing and how handy that is for her to have in the Ooga Booga times that she gets put in.
Yeah.
Um, but there's like tons of other little details. Like Verona really focuses on how hungry she feels, and I thought that that was really interesting, considering a lot of this story has had Verona having issues because like her and her body aren't that good at signaling stuff to each other. Like all the stuff with her headaches, or she doesn't usually notice that she's hungry, and other people have to force her to eat.
Mm.
Like the fact that this crucible kind of punishes you through your body and all that was like really interesting to see how Verona coped with that, because it's not usually something that she handles very well, I guess.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
also, she even loses all of her magical items. Like, I thought it was really fun that it's like for the last like 2 arcs have been Verona walking around being like, I don't care if I get gainsaid, I've been
Yeah, I'm
stocking up
ready.
magical items. And then she gets in here and it's like, no items for you.
No items, no magic. Good luck. Yeah.
But yeah, well, but like kind of a little bit of magic. Like, again, it's like at first you're like, oh, this is bad for Verona. But then it's like, no, no, no. Practice has been reduced to its core principles.
Yes,
That's
which
exactly
Verona
where she
has
fucking
exactly a
thrives.
very strong grasp on. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it is fun that basically her strategy is to immediately try and give herself more magic. It's just like
Yeah.
it's awesome.
Well, yeah, she's like, oh, so the pattern's unestablished. Well, I can fix that. I'll just establish
Well,
some.
yeah, yeah, and like, not just that, but she'll establish them by making deals with others. Like
Yes.
it's the Kennet special. You know what I mean? Like it's just really, man, it's just so cool. And the thing is, Charles obviously has excluded them because of his wackadoo conspiracies, but I think the more we see this, the more we're going to be like, oh, the Kenneteers are actually perfectly tailored to beat this thing. Like, that, it really feels
Yeah.
like the Kenneteers are perfect for this phase one, right? Like,
Yeah,
I
well,
don't
all
know.
three of them got through it. Admittedly, with the advantage of not having their memories wiped, I suppose. But
Yes, they didn't have it as hard as somebody might have it, but still, just like
yeah.
the exact skills that you need here are building community, making bonds. Like it's, oh, and maybe I'm just saying this because we see it from Verona's perspective. So of course Verona tackles it in the way Verona is going to tackle it. But like, I don't know, just seems like a pretty good strat to me.
Yeah, yeah. I do think it's interesting. Like, I wanted to talk about this with you because the idea that other people lose their memories. I think we talked about this a lot when the Kenneteers went head to head against Musa in that like judge, live the alternate version of your life where you have no community or network thing. And there's like an aspect to that of like, okay, like what when you're removing these aspects of somebody's self, like their memories and their history, what do you exactly evaluate? Like, this first level is sort of meant to test that you've got that anger and determination that Charles has such a boner for. But it's like I find it so interesting to consider like how much that's ingrained in you if you don't have your memories. Like what, like I don't know. This is just more like a fun existential question for me. But like what am I without my memories?
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting.
Like, does a normal practitioner going through this, do they get their memories back in stage 2, or are those gone forever? Like maybe part of Charles's poise, he wants someone to come out only with their Crucible history and without attachments to the rest of the world. Like I don't.
Yeah, I mean, Charles is trying to shape somebody here, right? Like part of the
Yeah,
Crucible is to shape somebody. So maybe the answer is removing their memories, even if it's temporary or partial, is a step in that because it helps break them down a bit so they can be molded more actively. I don't know.
yeah, and Megafire talked a bit about that in my live read. Actually, they've got like a lot of great theories about that. But I guess it's just interesting to me. It's like what sort of filter you're applying to who can get through changes a lot by removing the memories in a way that, like, I don't know, is like almost tricky for me to understand.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, again, sorry, just this first section is so delightfully tense. Like, I love the way Verona is tracking her age as she's walking around. Like,
Mm.
every time she takes a step, she's like, "Now I'm 32," and like when we don't know that the fucking Crusader King's respawn rules
Yes,
apply,
exactly.
um, that's really
It's really
terrifying.
tense, isn't it? Like one of
And,
Verona's first thoughts is, okay, well, I've got about 80 steps before I die.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then yeah, like the primevals are terrifying, like in the funnest way. I mean, obviously there's the scene later on the mountainside, which is
Yes.
fucking bonkers. But it's like it really does feel like you're watching Walking with Dinosaurs at times. Like, oh, it's great.
Yeah.
Also, yeah, people in chat are mentioning like that whole thing Verona had with her stretch marks, and I do just want to point out this, like Verona's relationship with her body image remains to me the most supernatural part of this story.
Yeah.
Because the fact that she's like, oh, they don't really bother me, I was like, that's bananas.
Yeah. It's Verona. That's how she is.
I know. Again, it's the craziest thing in this story.
Yeah.
Like the magic, I buy, but that, I don't know. It seems kind of crazy.
Yeah. I mean, props to Verona for how well she manages to build a community here. Like, it's not necessarily her bag, but she does pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially like because there's that first attempt she makes
Yes.
that is very unsuccessful.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like that very much had those like Charles vibes to me. Like Verona was like, "Hey, Alliance," and the guy was like, "No," and I was like, "I guess this is Charles's Crucible. That makes sense." Um, like, oh, sorry, now I'm picturing somebody playing DayZ. Like Verona was just walking around in a new
Yeah.
DayZ server, being like, "Friendly,
Yeah,
friendly."
she crouched. She held out her frying pan and did some crouches, and the other person just headshotted her and ran away.
um, but yeah, it's also funny, I guess, because it was Verona. I was like she kind of succeeds in, or she almost succeeds in making better alliances with the others than she does with the people, which was just very kind of Verona-y.
Mm.
But yeah, like as you said, it was like that's the thing, like even kind of with the disadvantage, all it seems that all of the Kenneteers couldn't help but actually manage to form a tribe.
Mm. Yeah.
Uh,
It's just a Kenneteer move.
yeah. So do you buy this theory that Verona mentions where she thinks that this initial brother and sister that like help form her initial tribe
Mm.
are potentially made out of recycled bits of Mal and Anselm? Because she calls out how both of them remind them of the two, and like it's a cool moment whether or not they are specifically recycled bits of them. But I really kind of like the idea that they are.
Mm. Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, it makes sense, right? Like Charles had to use them for something, so why not this?
Yeah. I mean, exactly. I guess it depends. Like originally, he deconstructed Kennet Below to get the power to last till London gave him power.
Yeah,
So I guess it depends whether he would have needed to use them in the meantime. I don't know.
yeah, yeah. It's a nice enough headcanon that even if it never gets confirmed, we can say yes.
Well, and like, because that is just like it is a really kind of like this feels like Verona finally actually saying goodbye to Mal and Anselm in
Yes,
this really
yes,
sad way.
yeah.
Um, like it is a really touching little moment. And again, one of those like definitely getting the vibes that we near the end of Verona's journey because she's having moments like that. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. So yeah, Verona forms a little family with Mal and Anselm in air quotes, and realizes that it's not just her that is solving the crucible, but her lineage. And she starts to build a family, the clan Hayward.
Yeah, and I mean, the bit where she first gives birth, or like it's like one step you're pregnant, next
Yep.
step baby popping out.
Yep.
It's so fucked up and funny. Like it's
Yep.
just it's I don't even know. And like it's while she's trying to connect with Alpi for the first time, and it's like there's just so much going on there. It's such a bonkers moment. Like this is crazy.
Yeah, she suddenly has a baby that she kind of holds out, and I was like, "Verena, did you have a baby just to offer it to another? That's very diabolical of you." But then, no, that's not what she's doing.
Yeah,
But
I think she gives the brain of the primeval to Alpi,
mm,
and then in return gets like presidential baby kiss powers.
yeah,
Um, yeah,
yeah. Um, but yeah, it's I think once we find out that okay, it's not just that you're aging, but also you're living out a Crusader Kings is a great, great parallel. It's like it's a perfect extension of the idea as well because it's kind of like it's uncomfortable and weird, right?
yeah,
When Verona has this baby, and then when she dies and becomes her daughter, it's like oh, this is so strange. But then it's like oh, but of course it makes perfect sense because this challenge is about Charles's legacy and forming a new world and having such a huge amount of context to be able to do that. So of course you need to live through like multiple lives. I don't know, it's just very cool.
yeah. Although it's one of those things because I was thinking about it from like Verona's perspective. I was like, I don't see how this achieves anything resembling encouraging you to build dynasties
Mm.
unless you're specifically doing something like Verona, which is creating mosses, which can't be the goal. It just like
Maybe
Charles.
that
It
was
just
Charles's goal.
no. He's not. He's not even allowed to be that stupid. Um, but like, I guess there might be a thing like because they're immune from the memory wipe. It's like the clearly the Kenneteers sort of kept their memories and their consciousness through each life, but maybe that wouldn't necessarily be true for normal players.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
So it'd be like part of your essence would go into the kids because we're measuring this innate drive or whatever the fuck is imprinted in your soul. Um, so like it was one of those things where I was like, that I don't really get how this actually does achieve Charles's goal of getting you to build dynasties that matter. But maybe that's because the Kenneteers aren't playing with all the rules; they're playing on easy mode.
Well, and we're in stage one, right? Like maybe this is still a test in the sense that this isn't part of the bit that's molding you. It's part of the bit that's checking you deserve to be molded. You
Sure,
know what I
yeah.
mean? So if you're able to do this by, proving yourself multiple times, tens, dozens, whatever it is of times, then you're good enough to go through to, you know, theocracy magic school or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, we'll definitely get there, but
Yeah.
yeah. I don't know. I was just like, it feels to me like the idea here is meant to be that you're establishing things that outlive yourself. I guess like it's anger and determination that goes beyond just your current
Yes.
circumstances or whatever.
Yes.
And I feel like part of that, if it actually needs to hold up for regular players, I'm just going to keep using the term players, by the way, because this is a video game for me.
Mhm.
Then yeah, like for that game design choice to make sense, you need to get memory wipes, and it just needs to be some part of the soul or essence in the descendants.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
uh, I also thought it was really fun, like because obviously this world skips the naughty bits of making kids, which I kind of agree with that as a decision, especially when you've got underage contestants. But like it also does feel kind of telling that Charles's simulation of this proto world skips over all the parts that are like the actual fun and community. Like you know, like it's sex being you know, an intense part of that or whatever. That like, yeah, I kind of agree with that call, especially for us as readers. But like, I don't know, it just I was like, yeah, the fact that Charles is like, oh, the enjoyable sex part isn't the point is just very Charles.
Yeah, I think Charles wants people not to have too much fun in his video game.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought it was really cool. I was really surprised that we got to see these like proto versions of our BFF
Yes.
others. I didn't like. Obviously, I picked this was a proto nightmare, but I didn't, for some reason, make the connection that it was actually Alpi until Verona pointed it out. But it was just like, oh, this is so cool. Like, it's so cool seeing, oh, this is what nightmares were like in caveman times, and this is what goblins are like, and yeah.
Yeah, I
Very
agree.
cool.
I had the same thing where I was like, "Oh, a nightmare's an interesting choice. I wonder how that relates to Alpi." And like, I was like trying to come up with things, and then it was like, after Totolo comes in, Verona's like, "No, I guess it's literally them, and they came in with the Kenneteers."
Yeah.
So that's really fun. Like, it's fun seeing obviously, like Lucy comes in with the Dogs of War later, and it's like, well, yeah, of course they followed her in. And yeah, like of course Verona ended up with like Tash and Toady and Alpi. Like, it's very fun.
Yeah, it's just very cool. Like,
It
it's
is, yeah.
very cool to see this stuff. It's awesome.
Yeah, and like this fun play on like these others came in to support them, but because of the rules of this place, they can't do it exactly. But you know, Verona can still reforge those connections very easily. Like,
Yes.
yeah, just fun.
Yeah. So yeah, Verona and the clan Haywoods reach the base of the mountain, but instead of climbing up, they decide to camp at the bottom a bit, building up a magical bloodline instead. The Aurum is not a fan of this plan.
Yeah. The Aurum basically has to come in and be like, no, you can't take your fully evolved Venusaur into the first gym, Verona. Like that.
You can't just grind on Route 1 until you murder Brock. Come on.
Which, wait, is absolutely what she's doing. And it's so funny because I was like, that's a fair call. Like she sort of explains it as she's going. She's like, I don't know what's coming up, so I'm just gonna get really powerful at the bottom of this mountain. And I was like, oh, there's gonna be a catch here, but that's fucking brilliant.
Yeah, it's very cheeky. It's so Verona. It's like and I can't believe I didn't think of this, but it's, of course you're not just gonna keep going. Like, you've solved how it works. Verona knows, okay, well, we're in a stable enough situation that I can build a community here and just fucking get my magical bloodline going, become a magical superpower, and fucking ride the primevals up the mountain shooting lightning bolts off.
Yeah, I mean, because yes, like you only have one life in this. Like, speedrun strats are not the go. Although I imagine Avery somehow still pulled that shit off. But like, yeah, like Verona's just like, okay, I'll just grind here then.
Yeah,
and I do love like the Aurum comes in as the fucking like server moderator, and she's like, I don't see what's stopping me from doing this. And the Aurum has to be like, it me, like I like fuck you.
I mean, it's a good comeback. His comeback is, back in the day, the gods were pernicious, so fuck you. And I mean, it's very cool. Hey, it's like, I wonder how accurate that is to the experience of what this time was like. You know what I mean? Like, if there was, Musa 60,000 BC or whatever, doing this kind of thing, would it be okay, now the gods kind of work to self-correct this thing, or is it just...
Oh, I see.
Like, is this actually what would have happened, or is this just because the Aurum's there as the mod, he can come in with the banhammer?
I mean, I definitely think that's part of it, but like I can totally see, like in the Ooga Booga times, like building that dynasty, getting more, like it's essentially getting more power. I guess that would get you more noticed, right? Like it would make sense that, like, I kind of get the vibe that humans are, like mammals in the dinosaur age, right? They're just like the little rodents. But then it's like, if you build one of these dynasties, that's the equivalent of going bigger, and that's just going to get you more noticed. So yeah, like I can't imagine somebody trying to pull Verona's shit
Yeah.
60,000 years ago might have run into that trouble of like that puts you in the bigger pond, and then it's like more selective for who comes out of that. Like that might be what the original Solomon was kind of like. Like maybe he was just one of the first ones to pull off his shit and also pull off the shit once you're on the tier of like gods and higher powers and titans.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I also I really enjoyed how much fun the Aura was having being very capricious here. Like it helps sell what Charles is saying later, that the Aurum really does give the impression that he's like, hey, I don't have to be a judge here. I can do whatever the fuck I want because this is primeval rules, baby.
Yeah.
And I mean, we'll get to that because I just refuse to accept that that's all the Aurum is up to, but I did really enjoy his vibe here.
Yeah. 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 It is fun. It is fun that he's just going in and fucking around. Yeah. But yeah, so the clan Haywood climbs up the mountain, getting absolutely shredded by monsters as they climb.
I know we've already said it, but like this is just—it's so fucking cool. This chapter, like, there's something just inherently epic about this multi-generational climb to the top of a mountain. Especially while there's a Titan versus Primeval fight happening on the side. It reminds me of the opening to God of War 3. I know I'm pulling out like all the video game references today, but that's just where my head's at for some reason.
I've got a good one coming up, Elliot. Don't worry.
Okay, I'm excited. But yeah, like all the parts of this fight are also great too. Like the way Verona is scrambling up the mountain, trying to pop out kids as she goes so she can keep climbing.
Yeah, when she has a kid and then dies and transfers herself to that kid almost immediately, I was like, this is fucking crazy.
Yeah, well, there's that part. Yeah, she like intentionally gets like targeted by a primeval. It reminded me of like those Outer Wild loops where you'd kind of be like, "Oh, I'm just gonna like kill myself on this cactus to like respawn quick." Like Verona reaches this point where she's like, "Oh, it's gonna be quicker if I respawn into my kid," and she just like gets herself killed. It's so funny.
Yes, it is good shit. Seeing this, I was really glad that the Titan was dealt with outside, right? Like, I can pretty easily imagine that if the Titan was here, Verona would have died. Like, shit, man. I'm glad they dealt with that already.
Yeah. Because it's like, oh, okay, the primevals are like the most real part of this level, because Charles kind of had some primevals or whatever, and it's like, thank fuck that the Titans are all made up then, because like, the last thing we need is more intense Titan energy.
Yeah, and it's like there's a huge storm on the mountain and shit, and I was just like, oh, so this is where the Titan was definitely going to go, right? On this side of the mountain right here.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, the Haywoods are nearly wiped out, but call on this slightly established bloodline for reinforcements, which brings Clan Ellingson and Clan Kelly to help.
Ooga booga.
Yeah, what a nice moment this is, hey.
It's great.
Lucy comes in riding on horsemen. Great shit.
You're right. That has to be the guy who was giving her the piggyback. I love that.
And Avery's there slinging children left and right. Pew, pew, children. Chuck a child at that primeval. Chuck a child at that primeval. Boom. Yeah, it's very fun.
That was one of those moments where it was like, when Avery came out, I was just like, bet she has a fuckload of kids. And it was like, yep.
Hey, that's the Kelly way, man.
I know. Yeah, these Kellys, man, like, not helping the world population crisis. But it's also like, again, when later on she tells us that it's like she didn't actually establish a bloodline of birth, but she also like made adoption part of it.
Yeah,
I was like, of course
cool.
you did. Like, if you'd asked me to guess, I might have guessed she would do that. But it was like, it was so perfectly Avery. I was like, yeah,
it's very perfect.
Like everything we learned about Avery's version of this level, I was just like, yeah, that is absolutely, like, if you'd asked me to spec what her run would have looked like, I probably would have come out with it. It's just perfect. We don't learn anything about Lucy's, though, which obviously I'm extremely salty about, because I think I brought this up last week. Forcing Lucy to have kids is exactly the sort of situation I've been after for so long. And she even brings up, she comes in, like Verona comes in, and Lucy's like, hey, I already asked Avery about this, but like, did you cope okay with the Bloodlines thing? And Verona's like, oh yeah, it was great. And then like starts, like bantering with Avery about like romance and stuff. And they don't talk to Lucy about it again. It's like, guys, why is Lucy asking this question? Like, did she not cope okay?
Mm.
I don't know. I'm really hoping that Lucy had a really rough time with the whole bloodlines angle. I really want to see like a flashback to this in her chapter in the Crucible or whatever. There's got to be. I feel like Wildbow's teasing us with like Lucy's is the only one we don't get details on
Yeah.
because she
Yeah.
comes out and it's just her and the Dogs of War too, right? Like Avery's surrounded by kids, whereas I think it's kind of said that like Lucy mostly just has the Dogs of War.
Mm. Yeah. That's the impression I got as well.
So yeah, there's like I don't know. There's
There's
another
a
shoe to
story
drop with
there.
Lucy stuff. Yeah, and I think Lucy's going to be next. So I got my fingers crossed, but we'll get there.
Yeah, we'll see, I suppose. Yeah, just great, just so fun.
Yeah,
But yeah, so the gang jumps forward in time, and now we're in a kind of cult populated theocracy vibe.
it's weird because it starts out as this like Garden of Eden energy. Like they're like in this
Yes.
garden and they're all in togas, and I was like, oh, this is like cool Greco Eden stuff. Like I'm all for it. And then it like slowly pans out, and it's like for some reason I was still picturing very like Greco-Roman aesthetic buildings and stuff, but it's I don't know. Yeah, it turns into deadly cult shit very
Yeah.
quickly.
Elliot, for someone who's seen a lot of Stargate, I'm surprised you don't recognize the template here, which is land in an idyllic paradise where you wear togas, and then turns out it's a horrific cult nightmare.
No, this is part of how I programmed. This is how I've programmed my brain, is to always be surprised by this, so I still enjoy Stargate for the 100th time.
I'm pretty sure they did about 30 episodes of this exact premise.
Actually, now that you're saying it, there is and it's a Greco-Roman architecture of all the buildings in that.
I'm picturing it in my head.
Yeah, you're right. That is exactly the episode of Stargate I was picturing for this. I had not even realized, but like literally that was the city I had in my fuck.
Yeah,
because it's also the one where they age really quickly.
I mean,
so it's just like my brain was connecting.
Now we know where we got him from. No, it's very Stargate. No, but anyway, can I point out this bit that is fucking hilarious? Avery says, "I'm surprised you didn't take it a step further. Give yourself topless Playboy bunny worshippers." And Charles goes, "Disappointed." It's just such a good line. Charles is such a fuck. I loved it.
Yeah, like there's a lot to criticize Charles for in this chapter specifically, but like credit where it's due. That's the best line in this chapter by a mile. Like, and because he specifically bitches about the Kenneteers and their like bants later on, but like he was fully into it in that moment.
Of course,
yeah. Like I was like, yeah, he's bitching about the bants, but I was like, man, when you're here, you're in it, and that was one of the best ones we've had in the whole story. Like, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think Verona got it 100% right last chapter when she was like, the reason that you haven't killed us, Charles, is because you love our banter. And I reminded myself, it's not this karma shit that he talks about later. It's just the banter.
That was great. I also love the reveal we get here that Verona hot glued the fucking thorn in the flesh to the spike. Like,
I mean, that has to have intentionally been a joke about what that Garrick said to her, right?
I didn't even think of that.
Was it? I can't even remember, but
Clay, I think.
How he was like, your plans are made of twine
duct tape and
hot
bubble
glue
gum.
or whatever. Yeah. But I mean, that's
hot
immediately where my mind went. Yeah, is like
I didn't think of that, but I love that. You're right. That does feel like Verona kind of owning the fucking
because like it's so, and she got so indignant about it. But look at yourself.
Yeah, exactly. But that's a classic Verona, is to take like an insecurity and turn it into like something she owns.
Strength. Yeah.
I just thought it was funny because like learning that she hot glued it onto the spike, I was like, man, even Charles doesn't deserve like that's so like the indignity of Charles having the thorn in the flesh in him because it was hot glued to the spike. That's just mean. Like, I know Charles has done a few things wrong. I'll give you that, but like this is too far.
Yeah. So can we touch on? They offer Charles again the chance to back down, which I was really not expecting. Like they say, and it's kind of, they lead into it sort of with some banter, but then it feels like actually it's genuine. Back down. You can still make amends. It will take a long time, but you're immortal. So, and he just kind of, I don't
Yeah.
know, in one ear and out the other.
Well, yeah, that's what's funny. He's like, Lucy brings up the concept of making amends about 4 times before he even addresses it. Like, he just ignores her. Every time
Yeah.
she says that, he just brings up
Yeah.
a new point. And it's really like the 4th or 5th time Lucy mentions making amends that he's like, I'm actually not going to do that. Like, it's just, yeah, like, Charles. Like, I mean, I don't know. There's nothing to say on this that isn't treading old ground at this point, but he can't stop. He won't stop. It's sad. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, the whole time he's talking to them, we mentioned this last week, but he's using he, him pronouns for the winner of the Crucible, which is just extra shitty and ironic given
Given the Kenneteers.
he's currently talking to these 3 who he had to exclude because they were going to win it. And
yeah.
it just feels like a classic Charlesism.
Yeah.
I don't know why I put this in this part of the notes, but I guess I have nowhere else to talk about it. I wanted to Gashwad for Carmine. That's my new pick because Charles seems pretty intent to die, and I was thinking about this, and I talked about it a little bit with a bird earlier this week. I reckon Gashwad to replace Charles as Carmine because he wants to be a loner, like he wants to sort of be by himself. He wants to be more violent.
He's anti-Red Cap Queen, right?
Yeah.
So
and then
seems
also
like a good choice strategically.
And because I was thinking, like, the problem with the search for the Carmine, like, 10 arcs ago, was that, like, we didn't really have anyone that we wanted for the role or to condemn to the role or whatever. But the role is very different now as well. Like, the sword moot has meant that what you want out of a Carmine is actually different to what you wanted pre-sword moot. Like, now, the Carmine is essentially to cover gaps or to highlight the gaps to everyone else. And just to kind of be a shit to keep people like the Musses from breaking the rules.
Yes.
And I kind of like Gashwad for that. Like, Gashwad is actually kind of a fun candidate for, like, not being the full Carmine, but being this Carmine whose basically role is to be a pain in the ass to people who aren't doing the sword moot.
Yeah.
And yeah, don't tell Gashwad I said this, but he actually seems like a pretty good dude. We can never let him know that that's part of the motivation because that would turn him off. He seems like that kind of guy, but like, yeah, I actually, the more I think about it, the more I'm like, Gashwad for Carmine, I actually can get behind.
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe we'll learn his weapon form when that happens for some reason.
Yeah. Maybe his weapon form is Charles. And it's been him the whole time. I like it.
The other thing I wanted to talk about, so this, like, the Aurum comes up in this conversation with Charles, where Charles is like, it's cool, the Aurum's going to take it after me, and he's great, and he's going to keep the core conceit, so I don't care what else he does, and my name is Charles, and I can always trust my friends. I've never made that mistake 100 times before. So this is going to go great. And, like, there's got to be another shoe dropping with the Aurum, right? Like, is that just me? I feel like I've been tinfoiling about the Aurum for far too long. I don't know what's reasonable anymore.
Yeah, I don't know. The Aurum just seems to be there to, well, for right now, to fuck with the Kenneteers.
Oh, and the logic Charles explains of, like, Aurums don't live that long, and the ritual, like, the Crucible gives him an opportunity to, like,
to stick around more.
Yeah, and also, like, it gives him more freedom. Like, we saw that in Verona's thing. Like, it's a good deal.
Yeah.
Particularly for an Aurum.
Yeah.
And a bunch of people pointed out in my live read, it's like, also that kind of is like, so what is Ryan's motivation to actually let people finish? Like, wouldn't Ryan just want people to keep, like, he's going to rig the rules so, like, they change so people always fail because he doesn't want to win and he wants to keep this gig forever, probably.
Yeah.
But I reckon, I don't know, I just feel like there's going to be more to it than that. We still haven't had the kind of, we got that description of how coileds work, and, like, when it was like in Arc 22 or something, and I still feel like that's never quite clicked for me as to, so I feel like, I don't know, I feel like I'm repeating myself from last week. I'm still convinced the Aurum is cooking more in the Crucible, and we're going to see next week that he's got plans that will screw Charles over in some way, and that will be funny but also scary.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure. It's really hard to place, right? Like, Yeah, man, he feels like he could do anything.
Yeah, and we still don't know what that personal question in 19.x Ryan's interlude was. Like, there's like,
Yeah.
I don't know. There's explanations for all of it, but I don't feel like there's any that I'm like, yeah, like that's yeah. Like I'm expecting more shoes to drop now that it looks like the Aurum is going to be our big bad for the next bit.
Mm.
Which I have to say, it is kind of funny because I think one of the details we got in Ryan's interlude was that the blue heron god was spawned because of his shit. So in a way, he kind of kicked off the whole story. So it's pretty funny that now he's kind of on top at the end.
Mm.
Like there is something very pale about the final baddie not being the guy we've been fighting the whole time, but the dickhead who was playing stupid games in the background.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It'll be a fun little extra challenge.
So I like this comment from Bill Nye though. Like Ryan is the bonus dungeon boss. It's like, yeah, he is the post game boss.
Yeah, he's the extra boss if you want the really high level gear.
Yeah, at the end of this chapter is when the credits usually roll on the Crucible, but you can keep playing for the post game to fight Ryan.
Yeah. Ryan. What a great boss name as well. The health bar fills up, the text fades in. Ryan. But yeah, so they're chit-chatting to Charles here, and he drops a bit of a bomb on them. They're not real. They're actually just karmic fabrications here to fuck with him because Charles is the center of this universe, goddammit, and everything's about him.
I'm really upset. Like, I mean, I don't know. I feel like Charles is going for one of those prizes we're giving out for Pale Predictor predictions because this would be a candidate for the craziest prediction award.
Yeah, except I don't know if this is one of those predictions that I'd pull out and I'd say, look, it's wild, so I had to pull it out, but I actually don't know if I agree with it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think Verona nailed it when she's like, I'm trying to figure out if you're crazy, and then he says the theory, and she's like, no, I'm less unsure now.
Yeah. It's like, even if it's true, right? Even if it's fully true as Charles thinks, it doesn't mean anything. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
What does it change? They still exist. It's not like they're going to disappear when Charles goes away. They might have been.
That would be a hell of an ending.
Yeah, but like, they are who they are to take down Charles. Sure, even if that's 100% true. But that still means they are who they are. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. And if it's not 100% true, it's even less impactful to me.
Yeah, it reminds me of that conversation that the Kenneteers had back, like right back in, I want to say, Arc 4 or so, where Avery was like insecure about her friendship with Lucy and Verona because it was only kicked off by magic or whatever.
Yes.
And Lucy's like, well, yeah, I mean, that might have like kickstarted or whatever, but like we've fostered it since then. Like that doesn't make it less real. And that's like the most charitable read I can give to Charles's theory here is like, at best, I think he might have been right that maybe the universe gave Miss and the Kenneteers a bit of a boost in the start of the story because they were anti-Charles, but like 5% tops of the credit gets to go to Karma at that point, right? Like, and especially like, I was also just like, it didn't make sense to me that would still be true after he ascended to be the Carmine. Like if they were Karma's weapon, that shit would have wrapped up. Well, they wouldn't have let him become the fucking Carmine. So like if Karma really wanted him dead, Lucy would have shot him out the front of the Kennet
100%
arena.
Yeah.
But then especially it's like once you became the Carmine, like aren't you Karma now? Like it doesn't make sense. Like
yeah, it's Charles trying to find reasons for him not winning as much as he feels like he should.
Yeah.
And he invents the Karma Police to kind of make up for it.
Well, it speaks to me. We talked about it last week, but when we were in Charles's head last week, he started this vibe of like this dude had not moved past the mindset he had when he was forsworn of the whole world was against him.
Well, because that was the best version of him, Elliot.
Well, yeah, exactly. But that's what it feels like. I mean, and I'm actually kind of willing to blame the judgeship a little bit for this. Like we've heard in this story how judgeship kind of locks you into where you are as you ascend. And so there's a chance that Charles may have found it harder to get over this mindset of the whole world is against me, and that's why he's holding on to this. But again, doesn't matter. Like it's still Charles. But yeah, I don't know. It just like, to me, this theory just really speaks to Charles just kind of refusing to accept that it's not his actions that mean everyone hates him. It's the fact that the universe is inherently aligned against him because he was forsworn.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? You know what they say, Elliot. This is what you get when you mess with us. Karma police arrest this man. He talks blah 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 blah. I don't know the rest of the lyrics, but as Radiohead said, this is what you get when you mess with us.
But yeah, I mean, I think we're at the end of the chapter now, and it's just like what a great Verona chapter. Like, it feels,
isn't it good?
It really did feel like it touched on a bunch of Verona's journey. Yeah. I just specifically, like, I loved it felt like this was that ultimate aspect of, like, Verona, and I think she calls it out explicitly, kind of tangentially, but like, Verona's always been about like going to the dark places and bringing the best out of them. And I feel like that's why I love Verona being the one to be our perspective for this first very Kennet below flavored stage of like, you get dumped in the grind. How do you pull the good bits out of it? And like, that has always been Verona's thing, and we see her kind of do it just as herself, and it's great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and it's kind of why I'm expecting Lucy next, just because it seems like you're kind of fighting Kennet above, and that's Lucy's special Kennet.
Yeah.
And also potentially cutting compromise deals with extra hostile others and stuff. Like, I think that'll be perfect as a kind of Lucy Crucible challenge.
Yeah. The other question is, where do we think they'll go in the future of the Crucible, right?
Yeah. Well, that's like, if my theory's right, that next is Lucy, because that's also the order that the first 3 chapters of the story were in. We went Verona, Lucy, Avery. So I kind of like mapping that here for the Crucible. So if it is Lucy fighting Kennet above energy next, I'd almost expect something more Kennet foundish for Avery in the third one, but that doesn't really mesh with anything Charles is cooking, so I don't know. Like, but I guess the thing we heard from Gray about the Crucible, wasn't it like pre-seal, early seal, and then after the seal? So maybe if it is 3 stages like that, I guess this cult stage is like around when the seal started. Like, this does kind of feel like the time in history where the seal was getting going.
Yeah.
So maybe there's like early innocence here. So I guess it would be after the seal, which would be closer to the modern day.
Yeah. I think we've gone into caveman times. We've had a kind of magical theocracy. If Chrono Trigger is anything to go by, we have medieval times, apocalypse domes, and then they'll fight Lavos at the end of the world, I think. So, yeah.
I wish Chrono Trigger had won the Game Club, so I understood that reference.
It's a really good reference, Elliot, and it perfectly hangs together with where they've been so far. So.
Oh, well, we'll start Game Club again one day.
Yeah, I'll get you to play Chrono Trigger one day. What a game. Oh, yeah. Great game.
Well, I'm still hoping that one will come back for Game Club.
Yeah, I'm sure it will once Silk Song comes out. Yeah.
I mean, it's basically, at this point, it's a race between Pale Ending and Silk Song coming out for when we try and restart Game Club.
Yeah, but enough talking about a different podcast, Elliot. We're here to talk about Pale, huh?
Yeah.
Let's get into some predictions, because I alluded earlier to a type of prediction that I love, which is wild predictions that I don't think will come true. And let me tell you, that's what I've got this time.
Okay, hit us with it.
This is from Dr. Bob 325, and it's a real, like, what was that Game of Thrones theory where Tyrion was a time traveling grandfather of himself or whatever?
Time traveling fetus theory, yeah.
Yeah, this is the Pale version of that theory, and I love it. Charles will complete the Crucible himself. Already, I'm like, I don't know how the hell this is ever going to happen, but let's just play along. Charles will complete the Crucible himself, institute a new seal, and it'll end up basically being the Seal of Solomon again, and it's a closed loop, and Charles actually had fucked himself the whole time. Which I think, putting aside all the parts where I don't know how it will ever happen, the fact that Charles's grandiose plan leads to exactly the problem that he thought it would is just like, that would be so perfect.
Yeah. Well, didn't Harold, and I think Dr. Bob called this out in the full version of their prediction, didn't Harold refer to the Crucible as a snake eating its own tail?
Yes. Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah. But I loved it. I just thought that was a very fun theory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Solomon was
forsworn. So
thanks, chat. Yeah.
Anyway. What theory did you pull out?
But that would be fun as well, because that would make Charles the real protagonist, right? Like,
then Charles actually would be the center of the story in the way he always wanted.
Well, because then we can have the Kenneteers actually. Because sorry, we didn't talk about it, but also I was kind of like when you're looking at like Charles's theory that the Kenneteers aren't real, part of me was like, well, also from a metatextual perspective, it doesn't feel very Wildbow to have like the big twist in a story be the protagonists aren't real.
Yes,
like that's you'd want to foreshadow that earlier, I think. So it was also just like, come on, Charles, like read the book.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've pulled out a comment from Patchy Cephalosauria. I think that's actually a real dinosaur.
Quick, check Land Before Time.
There was big Land Before Time vibes in level 1 of the Crucible.
Did you post that image? You made this hilarious image. So I thought it was really good.
Only my live read thread.
Oh, okay. Well, if you want to know more about what I think a hilarious image Elliot has put together is, then
I'll put it on X, our favorite social media.
Oh, yeah. I guess that is where we put memes every day, so that makes sense.
Yeah, it can be one of our many daily memes. Anyway, so this is from Pachycephalosauria in 24.14's Reddit thread. And basically they've got more. Yeah, thank you, chat, for helping me pronounce that correctly. They've got even more reasons why Charles's the Kenneteers aren't real theory is stupid. The big one being they took down the Alabaster Doe, who was like the embodiment of like playing the karma game.
Yeah.
The Kenneteers did her as a side project to get to Charles, and it's like, if they were arrows aimed by karma, it seems weird that karma would have them go to him via
the Alabaster.
Yeah. And also like Musa as well. Like Musa was another it's just like there were so many high karma casualties on the way to Charles. It just doesn't make sense.
No, I agree. It's a perfect call.
I really loved the way that they summarize this. I'm just going to read the end of their comment verbatim. What Charles has demonstrated here is the greatest flaw in his worldview. Everything bad that happens to him can be traced back to him being forsworn, and none of it could ever be because he might have made some choices that had consequences outside of him being forsworn. Everything negative in his life has to revolve around the time that he spent being forsworn, despite so many opportunities being afforded to him that other forsworn never receive. And I mean, just a great way of summing up, I think, what a lot of us have been thinking for a while now. Great comment.
Yeah, that is really strong. I mean, it feels like we're rounding the end of the story here. If you want to predict when they'll choose to fight Lavos, or if they're going to be OG Chrono Trigger or the remake where you get to raise slimes or whatever, then you can head to the Pale Predictor form and leave your predictions about that there. That's linked in the show notes down below.
Yeah. And then we don't have discussion question answers this week because we didn't ask you one.
Yeah, but we do have a discussion question for next week.
Yeah, and we're interested. You go.
Well, I was just going to say, do we want to welcome back our guest host for this episode, and they can do the discussion question? Elliot, why don't you welcome them back?
Okay, here they are.
Okay, and then I guess we edit it in there. All right.
I really thought you were going to do something that time. I thought you brought it back so that you could do a bit.
But yeah, so leave your answer to that discussion question in the show notes down below.
Yeah. That discussion question, again, is which character from another story do you think would do best at level 1 of the Crucible?
Yes. Leave your answer to that discussion question in the discussion thread, which you can find linked in the show notes down below.
And I guess with that, follow us on X.
Yeah.
I think we're also technically on Blue Sky, but I don't get it, Ruben. You need to manage the Blue Sky.
Are we technically on Blue Sky? Send me the.
Yeah.
I don't even know how to do it yet.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sure you'll pick it up.
I've never used it, but yeah. Anyway, I guess check us out on Blue Sky. We'll post a Pale meme every single day there. And if you want to find out more info about the Duff Media Network, including the meetup in Maine, you can head to duffmedia.com. There's more information there.
Yes, don't forget to head to patreon.com/Doof Media.
Mm-hmm.
That's the place where we get the money that's going into All Packed Up too. It's also where like all the money to fund other aspects of the shows, like all the stuff going into organizing this meetup for Kingslingers, like all of that happens because of that Patreon is how we keep making these episodes and doing all the other stuff too.
Yeah, to kind of touch on that a bit more explicitly here, I think this is a good opportunity for it. You know, we do this show as a hobby, and it doesn't cost us. There's some costs with server hosts and stuff, but it doesn't cost us much money, which means that really at the stage we're at right now, which is I think a position we're pretty happy to be in, any money that we get as a community pretty much directly goes into doing fun things for the community, and like that's really nice to be able to do. So thanks to all our patrons for allowing us to do that. And if you want to help us do more events and do more cool things, man, we have so many cool things planned for All Packed Up too that are explicitly because of the money we get from patrons. So yeah, if you want to be a part of that and kind of support that, you do get some bonuses. You get bonus episodes and stuff, but even just it allows us to nurture and give back to this community more, which I think is wonderful.
Yeah. But even more importantly, Wildbow does do this for a living, and he does that via patreon.com/Wildbow. So the ultimate stop really needs to be his Patreon, because this is how he affords to give us these stories.
Yeah.
And I think we can all agree 3.5 million words in that Pale's a pretty good one.
It is a good
and he
story.
should be rewarded for that.
So make sure you go to Wildbow's Patreon. If you can't afford it right now, have some children, build up a bloodline where they're very rich, get some generational wealth going. I'm pretty sure that's how all the billionaires have done it, is they do some kind of magical path where they...
No, I'm pretty sure they're all self-made.
Oh, they're self-made.
I read a bunch of articles about it. Yeah.
And with just a small $2 million loan, they've made all that wealth. But yes, so head to Wildbow's Patreon and support Wildbow making these great stories. And Elliot, do you want to hit us with that classic sign-off we hear every week?
Yes, and credit to Jenny from Pale in Comparison for this one. You can call me Derosha, because I was born to tame your primeval.